Nothing was around before the Big Bang.
Stephen Hawking died in 2018. He was the most famous theoretical physicist of recent times. What made him famous was that he suffered from a degenerative muscle condition. Because of that, he couldn't move except using an electronic wheelchair. He used to press buttons to move around. He couldn't even talk. And he had an electronic voice box that made him sound like a robot, but he was really smart. And he made some really amazing discoveries that made him look like a pure brain. So he became a little bit of a science celebrity. Everybody wanted to see him. Everybody wanted to talk to him. He developed a mathematical description of how the universe began to exist at the Big Bang. It's part of what's called the Penrose-Hawking singularity theorems. But he was an atheist. He didn't believe that the Big Bang was evidence for the existence of God. This is God's cosmos. I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson asking him a provocative question.
So, Stephen, everyone wants to know, what was around before the Big Bang?
Nothing was around before the Big Bang.
How could he believe that? How could he say that nothing made the Big Bang happen?
It depends on what you mean by nothing. Stephen, by nothing, he means no thing, like the physical objects that we touch and experience that are made of mass energy and exist in space-time. He said that at the Big Bang, everything began to exist. So in that sense, there was nothing before the Big Bang. He's correct. But if you think about it, that's not what Neil deGrasse Tyson is really asking. He is saying, before the Big Bang happened, was there something else or was there not anything else?
I think Stephen would say that no, there wasn't. It's impossible for anything else to exist. That things existing in space-time made of mass energy are the only things that exist. There's nothing else.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what he would have said. So let's think about it. What basis is he saying that on? What's his evidence? What do you think?
I think he'd say that it's unscientific to believe in anything else. I think he'd say that to believe in something not made of mass energy and doesn't exist in space-time is like believing in a fairy tale.
Very good. I think that's along the lines of what he would have said. But that still leaves us with the question. The Big Bang happened, the universe began to exist, so what made it exist? If we were to ask Stephen this question, what do you think he'd say?
I think he'd say that nothing made the Big Bang happen.
Yes, and even though it sounds like a very simple statement, it actually has a technical name. What he's saying is that the beginning of the universe, the coming into existence of the universe, is a brute fact. A brute fact is something that doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need to be caused. And Stephen would say that the beginning of the universe, the coming into existence of the universe, is that kind of a thing. And this is where the Kalam cosmological argument that Bill Craig has developed comes in. Bill talks to philosophers and scientists like Stephen Hawking, and he wants to prove to them that the universe began to exist and it had to have a cause for its existence. Bill uses a principle that was first articulated by an ancient Greek philosopher called Parmenides. He said, "From nothing, nothing comes." Bill says that something can't come from nothing. Why? Because when we look around us in the universe, things always appear from other things. The oak tree appears from an acorn. That's where it comes from. A chicken comes from an egg. Whenever we see something appear in the universe, it always comes from something. It doesn't just appear out of thin air, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. That would be magic. That's impossible. Nobody believes in magic. That's why Bill says the universe had to come from something, and that something is God.
How would someone like Stephen Hawking respond to that?
I think scientists like Stephen Hawking would say that the Big Bang is an exception. They would say that yes, in our everyday experience of things, whenever something comes into existence, it always comes from something else. But the Big Bang is special because we know that before the Big Bang, nothing else existed. So the universe came into existence from nothing, and it's an exception to the rule.
Bill Craig would say that's like believing in magic.
Yeah, but what the atheist would say is that when you appeal to God, that's like magic. Because belief in God is like a fairy tale. So that's what the scientist says, and that's what Bill Craig says. Who do you think has the stronger argument?
I don't know.
I think the scientist does.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Okay, so think about this. On what basis are Bill and the scientists saying that things come from other things? The basis is the everyday experience of things in the world. We always observe trees, oak trees coming from acorns. We always observe chickens coming from eggs. We always observe things coming from other things. That's what we observe, and we always observe it that way. But here's the key thing. Just because you always observe something happening one way doesn't mean that it always has to happen that way. Both believers, theists, and atheists, they both agree on this. David Hume has a famous problem called the problem of induction. He said this. He said that just because you always observe things happen in a particular way doesn't mean that in the future they have to happen that way. And for believers like us, we believe in miracles. So we believe that yes, fire and burning, for example, are associated with each other. Wherever you have fire, you have burning. But with the Prophet Abraham, his people threw him into the fire and it didn't burn him. So just because something happens a particular way all the time, you can't say on that basis that it has to happen that way all the time. All you need is to observe it actually not happening that way once, like the miracle with the Prophet Abraham, and that will break the generalization. The generalization is not necessary. And so from the perspective of the scientist, what he's saying is that I can infer that before the universe, there was nothing. So yes, in my everyday experience, things always come from other things. But in this case, the universe came from nothing.
So in order for Bill to beat the scientist, he needs to show why it's necessary that something can't come from nothing.
You're almost there. He needs to show that something is necessary. But what does he need to show is necessary? He needs to show that it's necessary that if the universe began to exist, then something must have made it exist.
He needs to show that it's impossible for it to be a brute fact.
Yes. And that's what the Muslim scholars of Kalam did when they made their Kalam argument. And Bill doesn't do it when he makes his Kalam argument. Bill's Kalam argument is actually not the same as the traditional Kalam argument of the Muslim theologians. The Muslim theologians would have responded to this brute fact objection like this. They would have said that the universe began to exist. That means that it's possible for the universe to not exist because it didn't exist, and it's possible for the universe to exist because it existed. Both are possible. That means that its existence is not intrinsic to it. It doesn't come from itself because it didn't exist. If its existence came from itself, it would always exist. But it didn't exist. That's what the beginning of the universe shows. So existence is not necessary for it. It's possible. And that means that if it exists, something must have made it exist.
Contingency.
Yes. You remember from our classes in Kalam, this is called the argument from contingency. What the Big Bang shows is that the universe is contingent. Because if the universe began to exist, that means that it didn't exist and then it existed. That means that its existence is contingent. It's not necessary. And that means that it needs something else to make it exist. Now, I want you to pay attention to this. And I want you to note the difference between what I've just said, which is what the traditional Muslim scholars of Kalam would have said, and between what Bill says and what atheist scientists say. Bill and people like Stephen Hawking would say that the fact that something always comes from something else is a generalization of our experience. And I showed you that generalizations from our experience are not necessary. That's not what the mutakallimun are saying. What the mutakallimun are saying is that it's not a generalization, it's one observation. What's the observation? The observation is that the universe began to exist. This one observation that the universe began to exist shows us that the existence of the universe is not intrinsic to it. It shows us that something had to make the universe exist.
Necessarily.
Yes, exactly. This is the most important thing that Bill gets wrong in his Kalam argument. He doesn't base his argument on the contingency of the universe, but the mutakallimun do. And that's why they can respond to the brute fact objection, but he can't. What I've just shown you, what I've just explained to you, is something that only Muslims can say, because there's no one else who believes in the radical contingency of the universe except the Muslims. It's called Tawheed. We all know it. Everything is dependent on God. This is also why Bill gets something else wrong as well. And I've never seen anybody else explain it, point it out. It has to do with the fact that he believes that Jesus is God. It has to do with his commitment to the Christian doctrine of the Trinity.
That's really fascinating.
It is, and I think I need another episode to spell it out. If you like this episode, then check out my Why Islam is True course, in which I teach you 4 rational arguments that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself used to show that Islam is true. Learning on YouTube is great, but if you want to reach a learning goal, a learning destination, like how to make rational arguments, how to think critically as a Muslim, how to engage with modern science as a Muslim, then you need to follow a map that's been specifically designed to take you to your learning goal, step by step, through a series of carefully designed learning objectives and learning activities that take you to your final learning destination. That's how this course has been designed. This course shows you the what, the why, and the how. It shows you what we believe as Muslims. It shows you why those beliefs are based on evidence and 100% true based on Quranic rational arguments. And it shows you how to use those arguments to address common objections against Islam by atheists and others on topics such as evolution, the problem of evil, the age of Aisha, and much more. It consists of 20 modules, and it includes bi-weekly live sessions with me, pre-recorded lessons with 81 bite-sized videos, 247 application activities and real-world scenarios, a 24/7 community where you can ask a question and get it answered within 24 hours. And there's an option to buy a course textbook as well. Find out more at www.whyislamis.true/course and learn why Islamic seminaries are adopting this course as part of their curriculum to train the next generations of scholars. This course is actually the first and prerequisite course in the Basira classical curriculum in modern context, a 4-year curriculum consisting of 31 courses that will teach you everything that a Muslim needs to know about their deen and be ready for modern society. This 4-year Basira seminary curriculum is based entirely on the Muslim scholarly tradition, but it teaches you how to apply that tradition to the world in which we live, and it's taught completely in English. Why Islam is True is the first course in that 31-course curriculum. Check it out at www.whyislamistrue.com/course.